Welcome to Brazil Forum UK 2020. I am Eduardo Carvalho, and I have the scholarship of the Chevening British program, and I will be here with you at this session, The Challenges of Culture. This and all the other sessions are being possible thanks to the team of volunteers that are part of our organizing committee. We have the support of our sponsors, Fundação Haddad, Fundação Lehman, Idea Big Data, and the law offices PGMB, M, and Matos Filhos. And also our broadcast partner, Estadão, who gives us the opportunity to broadcast this session to the whole world, live and freely. Only culture can remove the bad things from people. This is a statement that can be found in many T-shirts in Brazil. It's a protest against the constant devaluation and attacks in the cultural sector in the last few years. Treated as something not relevant, and now during the pandemic, the culture and art, supported by technology and creativity, became synonymous with well-being. Without it, our situation in social isolation would be even harder. So after we overcome these health difficulties posed by COVID in Brazil, will the public power change the perception and the importance, change the perception about the importance of culture in the country? I would like to invite our four panelists, Teresa Cristina, who is a singer and composer, who since March has been done over 280 hours live performances via Instagram. I would like also to invite Cláudia Leitão, who is a consultant in public policies for culture and economy, creative economy. She's a former National Secretary for Creative Economy in Dilma Rousseff government and currently is the director of Observatory Fortaleza. João Leiva is from João Leiva Cultural and Sport, responsible for the main mappings of cultural habits in Brazil, currently doing a doctorship in creative economy. Eduardo Saron is a manager in culture for the last 20 years and also the director of Cultural and Council of Culture and Creative Economy of the state of São Paulo. Saron is also one of the founders of the Brazilian Forum for Cultural Rights. So I would like to thank all of you here. The global economy has been hit with the pandemic and the cultural sector was the first to stop. So according to a UNESCO research, the culture and education, in the culture and education, 90% of the institutions had to close the door and near 13% of them are threatened never be able to open again owing to financial problems. So I would like to start asking Saron. I would like to ask you, Saron, to give us a overview of the impact of the pandemic on the Brazilian institutions that deal with culture. These are institutions that were dealing already with difficulties owing to the budget cuts, how it's going to be the future of these institutions and how will this impact in the normal relationship of people with museums and cultural centers. Firstly, I would like to thank all of you to be here. I would like to greet Teresa here that has been making our life a bit lighter with her music via the lives in Instagram. I would like to greet João Leiva, Cláudia Leitão, and all of you who are organizing this event that is very beautiful in partnership with Estadão, great Estadão. It is very important what Estadão is doing and the sponsorship of all these sponsors that are working with you in this event. When we talk about the pandemic, there are two issues. In Brazil, we are now grieving for over 50,000 deaths. The second point that I would like to highlight is that the pandemic is increasing the misery in Brazil to levels never seen before. We in the cultural and artistic world, as it was mentioned by you, the problem that we are going through is not happening just in Brazil, it happened all over the world. We were the first to close the doors. And if you look at the journey of the pandemic, we probably will be the last ones to reopen our doors. This return cycle involves opening the museums, and we have to open in a different way with distancing, and then we are going to open first the museums, then probably the theaters, and then the cinemas will be the last ones to be open. And when we talk about having a large group of crowds, this probably will take some time to happen. When we talk about culture in Brazil, this is a sector that has been suffering a lot. This is a problem that we've been suffering since 2008, 2010, because at that point we started to have reduction of the financial input to the sector. And I think that the cultural sector is based in a tripod that I will talk about later. But going back to the problem of the reduction of investments that we had, this started in 2008, 2010, and these have been aggravating more and more a long time. Of course, this is also worsened by the fact that there is little understanding from the society in terms of understanding the importance of culture and understanding the importance of the poetry, the music, for the well-being. So, of course, we lack this understanding how this is important for our education, for our well-being. I think that the return to development will be hard. You mentioned data on that regard. I believe that directly and indirectly, in the cultural universe in Brazil, we have over 5 million people work in this sector, and then we have in this sector, from the lawyer that defend the copyright of the artist to an artist like Teresa Cristina. So what I think is that we have to position ourselves in two ways. We have to first base ourselves on the protocols that will answer, will respond to the challenges at short and medium term. And this point, this positioning has also to take into account the positioning when we look at the pandemic, the post-pandemic, and how the society will readjust after the crisis. And I believe that this will happen only when there is knowledge, and this knowledge is spread in offering, when the knowledge is offered for the society that enables the society to reorientate itself, to repaginate itself in understanding what is the purpose of culture. So when we look at this dramaticity that the pandemic put us under, and this inequality, when we look at how culture has been impacted, of course, the protocols will be important for us to return as quickly as possible to development and make active the big organizations, the public power that makes art in Brazil. So these protocols need to help this segment to reposition itself, and looking at itself as a segment under this perspective of finding more equality, fighting inequality. Otherwise, what we have been living before the commodities, so pre-2008, 2010, as I said, we are just lose all the gains that we had since in this realignment post-pandemic. That is very interesting, Saron, and I would like to use some of the comments that you made and ask Claudia about the law Aldir Blanc, that is the law that it was created celebrating Aldir Blanc, an artist that died of COVID-19, and this is a help from the government of 13 billion reais to help the culture in Brazil. So, Claudia, what do you think of this? What is your opinion about this law? Eduardo, I am very happy to be here with all of you and to talk about this context that we live in Brazil. It's interesting to debate about a few of the scenarios that we are considering. Firstly, I would like to say that I am very excited about this area. I am debating with different groups about the importance of what we've been doing. But Eduardo, actually, we are not just 50,000 deaths, Eduardo. We actually have over 60,000 deaths in Brazil owing to COVID-19, and I expect that this number will increase. When we look at that, we have to look at the emergency situation that we live. We had a law that has been sanctioned by the federal government. Of course, we were concerned about that. This was as a result of a very interesting movement that it was apolitical. All the parties, political parties, were in favor of this subsidy to the culture. And this is important. This is power. Because when we talk about culture, I know that when we get to the politician, he will remember all the memories that they have of interaction with art. So this is positive. It was unanimous, the approval of the project in the Senate and in the Federal Chamber of Deputies. Now, once this law is sanctioned, we have to have an exercise that Brazil is not very good at. That is to have the basis, the funds that come from the national fund that should go to the state funds and then be distributed via municipalities. This is a country that has over 5,000 municipalities and a difference in terms of how they apply culture at municipal level. Because when we talk about the popular cultural, when we talk about popular culture, for example, in Ceará, state of Ceará, in the northeast of Brazil, I remember that when Gilberto Gil was the culture minister, he said, well, when we support popular culture, we are just supporting our heritage. So when we talk about how we are going to support the popular culture, how could we do that? We don't have a mapping of them. How can we support all these cultural masters in the north of Brazil, in the northeast? How can I get to the slums at Rio de Janeiro, the slums of Fortaleza, at the poor areas where the states are not even present? So what we have in these slums is violence, is militia, is barbaric acts. I don't think that it will be easy to distribute the subsidy because we don't have a national structure that really allow the implementation of the resources that come from the top to be spread at the bottom. Which is very interesting that you mentioned, because this money is coming from top to bottom, and it will be interesting to see how Brazil articulate to disseminate this subsidy at the basis of the pyramid. So when we talk about reinvention and resilience, I believe that this, at this moment, is very important for all of us in this pandemic. I believe that everybody has gone through a difficult moment. We are still living this difficult moment, trying to respect the rules. And when we talk about reinvention and resilience, definitely these are words that could define Teresa Cristina. Teresa Cristina, in the middle of pandemic, just decided to take her mobile phone and started to do live performances, singing a cappella via Instagram. And she has hosted very big names of the Brazilian music. And I would like to ask you, Teresa, what is the impact that this had on your career in using these new technologies to disseminate your music, to talk about music? Eduardo, good afternoon. It's great to be here. I am a bit shy to be here with all of you because you are so important, and I don't think that I have the background to be here. I started to do the lives via Instagram because I was worried about my mental sanity. So this was at a point that Brazil didn't even have 10,000 deaths. But at that point, I was already concerned with the behavior of our federal government. The way that he was behaving, it was completely different from the behavior of most of the other countries. And here in the country, we have a president that actually wants us to be dead. He wants us to die. He's not concerned if we will survive that. This is a president that did not commiserate with the death of Aldir Blanc. He was a great compositor, a great artist in Brazil. He's part of the artistic segment in Brazil. He's very important for the culture in Brazil. So at that point, I was very concerned about that because we had a high number of deaths and an increased erratic behavior from our president, from our Ministry of Health. This is a president that just goes out in the street torching everybody and doesn't recognize the pandemic. He just looks like a spoiled boy. And I was very concerned about that. I am a person who lives at the suburbs of a large city. I have my mother that is in the vulnerable group in the suburbs, the outskirts of the big cities in Brazil. They are always the vulnerable group because they are people who doesn't have education enough to understand what is going on, and what they see is a president that see that they are not important to him. So, and at the same time, these people are seeing the news that actually this is not just a little code that they can buy a paracetamol and the pain goes away. So for me, it was very concerning when I saw the people behaving the way that they were behaving, the president behaving the way that they were behaving. And there are some people in the streets that are behaving in a way that, oh, how can I describe that? They are totally out of reality. So this was growing more and more. And when I started these lives, I believe that I started my first live was on the 26th of March. I had 98K followers, and now I am reaching nearly 300,000 followers. Since my first live, I got 200,000 followers, and this was without doing any marketing. My action when I started that, it wasn't to add followers to my Instagram profile. It was actually to do my own research in art. I was trying to make myself busy, uh, to prevent myself to be thinking about those deaths, to prevent myself from being concerned with the criminal action from the government, because there is no way that we can describe what is going on in Brazil in any other way. So to tell you the truth, I even didn't notice when their lives became daily. This was just organic. And my act, it was a desperation act. And it is an act that people started to follow. I met loads of famous people in my lives, but actually I met other people that are the Brazil that I believe, the Brazil that I am hopeful for. Claudia was talking about the masters of culture in Brazil. I met, for example, the master, Aurique, who is a person who is 86 year. Aurinda is 86 years old. She's from Itaparica. And she was doing a live because she was trying to fundraise the payment of the ceiling in her house. She lives 86 years old, an old woman that is very talented, living in a very precarious situation. She is a she's the heritage for she's the heritage of our Bahia culture, and this is the state that our culture masters are living in Brazil. And like Eduardo said, culture is the first that closed the doors. Our segment was the first to close the doors, and we're going to be the last one to reopen our doors. So take into account all of that. What I tried to give people is giving them back a little bit of beauty. Because 3 years ago, as an artist, I've been called criminal, causing havoc, communist. I don't know. I was told to go to Cuba. I don't know. I don't know how they define me. And we are going to talk about that, Teresa. And I would like you to mention more about that. I think that's something that you mentioned really well, Teresa, is the fact that their lives are helping people. And of course, this is still something that is on debate, how to monetize these lives or this digital world. And I would like to talk to João about that. We still don't know how we are going to do entertain, how we are going to convey culture using the digital world. And when we talk about that, it's not just Instagram. We have a lot of artists saying that this digital world has zero profitability. So I would like to ask you, João, what is your opinion about this new way of doing culture via the digital world? And what do you think that is needed for this new modality to survive post-pandemic? Eduardo, thank you for inviting me to this forum. I would like to greet all the other panelists present here. It's amazing to have this opportunity to debate culture here. We have over 50,000 people die in Brazil. The impact on the economy is brutal. And of course, culture is not an exception. I would like to extend a bit on what it was mentioned by Saron. We were the first to close the doors. I would like to reiterate that. And this will have a general impact on culture in Brazil. And of course, the context that we had in Brazil is that we were already in a very difficult moment in Brazil. If we talk, for example, about the Rouanet law, the Rouanet law broke records. What does that mean when we read that headline? We in the culture had a negative growth for the last 2 years. Now is the third year that we are going to a growth that is not even 1.5 in our segment. So actually, what happens is we are not having an update on our financial funding. The peak of the Rouanet law happened in 2011, nearly 10 years ago. And since then, there was a reduction of the financing via this law. 2016, we had the worst. And when we talk about the Rouanet law and the financing via the Rouanet law to the culture in Brazil, what we receive today is exactly what we used to receive in 2006. In São Paulo, we had a reduction of over 30%. In Rio de Janeiro, we had a reduction of 60%. When we look at what it was financed by the state, there was also a big cut on the budget. So in São Paulo, the only good news on that is just the municipality of São Paulo that in the last 4 and 5 years, they have invested a bit more. But in Rio, the municipality of Rio, the budget that is passed by the municipality to the culture segment dropped 5-6%. And among all that, looking within this context, we have then the pandemic. The digital world has been imposed by the culture, and when we start with the TV, of course, I believe that this is not going to be the way out for everybody, the digital world. Of course, now it's happening well because everybody is at home. But when things start to normalize, it will be a different relationship. I believe that actually digital will make things more accessible, for example, for music, but some other activities, it will be very hard. So the challenge is how to maintain diversity. This is the basis of the vitality of culture, and how to respond to the issue raised by Claudia. How can you make it accessible for everybody? How can you make this subsidy that is coming from the federal government to all the bases of the pyramid? And digital culture is not going to be the answer for everybody. We talked about pandemic, we talked about several questions, but one of the things that is a constant is that the cultural segment is always living in recession. And this is very hard to accept in a country that is so diverse as Brazil. So when we talk about Brazil that has continental dimensions, we see that this is a segment that has always lived with challenges, but now this became worsened with this federal government. We had the extinction of the Ministry of Culture. We have the culture being attached to another ministry with a high turnover of the leaders of that department. So with the pandemic, we just have additional difficulties. For example, in Rio, even though the carnival generates nearly 1 billion reais to the economy, they still have a lot of barriers. And this is a reflection of what is the peripheral, what is the outskirts culture in Brazil. So the fringe culture in Brazil, they always have these prejudice, like the funks, and the urban fringe culture is always suffering in Brazil. Now, this is a reflection of what happens in Brazil. For example, we have in Madureira the parties, the funk, the samba parties, and we have a Black culture that is very strong. And before the pandemic, I always used to go to visit the different roda de sambas, which are samba parties in the different areas of Rio, in Padre Miguel, in the lower Fluminense area of Rio de Janeiro, the north area. And it was everything very beautiful. So we started to notice that the Black population is, they notice that the federal government doesn't want anything with us, and we don't want anything. It's like we are Maranhão. We are just ignoring the government, and the government is ignoring us. So
we let us do our thing, and people started reinventing themselves. So there's a professor of history in Rio called Raimundo Jonathan. He created an event in Madureira. He created a picnic and called Black entrepreneurs. So the guy with the small shop, the cooker which sells her food at the square, the rapper that has done a new rap. So he united music, fashion, stylists, culture, music, rap, theater, and created this great picnic that at the beginning that had 20 people, that it increased to 200 people, reaching 2,000 people. That was his initiative of this professor of history, such as other rodas de samba, such as charmy parties. People started going after these things of their audience with basically personal initiatives. And I think that when we have a mayor that he goes against carnival or the roots of samba in Rio, he's not doing it by chance. It's places of resistance and cultural resistance. If it can become a political resistance just like that, even because everything is political resistance. And when you provide culture to a population, you're providing critical thinking to this population. They become a very strong political agent. So it's not by chance that these places are affected. It's a very well architectured plan, although those that are architecturing this plan, they're not cultured, they're not educated, they are very poorly educated in the worst sense of this word. So some errors they make are errors that are so basic, and that hurts us very much, because what we think is that they think, oh, whatever, let's just leave it like that and see what happens. And with the pandemic, it's even worse. We have been hindered even more. And you talked about very specific and good topics. I wanted to give a word to Saron. You know, these things are having to sell food, of pitching in because there is no government incentives. Considering Teresa Cristina's outlook, how can we promote incentives to promote cultural incentives in the suburbs? We need that to happen so that this cultural production gains force increasingly. Yes, I think it's a very severe situation. João provided some data regarding the Rouanet law, data that are very cruel. Also, for example, the Cultural Natural Fund should be this space to reach the masters, the suburbs that Claudia and Teresa talked about. In the last 7 years, you could take a look at the National Cultural Fund. It basically reached zero in terms of investment, and it's such an important role that it has to distribute funds throughout this new federative pact, which is one of the fundamental things that Brazil has to overcome, regardless of culture, art, and the Algae Blanc law that Claudia and Eduardo mentioned. It kind of helps in the sense that the pandemic situation that this fund should be due, which was not only reached zero investment, but never actually reached its potential. But Eduardo, the main obstacle, the main hardship in this new situation we're living is that the Brazilian state already have a very severe problem in terms of investment. wrong decisions, lack of priorities, and also lack of resources and funds. That's true, but this has worsened after the 2014 crisis in a very exponential manner. So we have public deficit, for example, of 66% of everything we zero annually. If we get our tax burden plus everything that we generate annually, the Brazilian state is consuming nearly 40% of all of this. So there is a very complex issue in the state that has to be reassessed. And with the pandemic, the health sector is demanding, obviously, naturally, demanding much more funds. And that has to be understood as a matter of survivance. And most of all, accepting the people and welcoming the people that need the SUS. And thank God we have the SUS that is inspired by the NHS. The thing is that the less tax collection due to the economic crisis and demand of the sectors that need these funds much more. If we think of the Maslow pyramid, we go back to the basic of our needs of eating, drinking, surviving. We're at this level of the pyramid in the Brazilian society. The situation is going to become even worse. So maybe our challenge here of researchers like Cláudia, João, to be able to accept more energy, with more energy, Teresa, and the entire, and all the artists in Brazil, what we want from the governors are demands that are also for us, which are, for example, take a look at the surveys, the data, the evidence, take into consideration these numbers, these figures for you to prioritize what has to be done, take decisions. I think that in the world of the culture, they need, including universities, observatories also, what do we have to do to invest in culture, in social and economic development, the transformation of a society, so that the entire society sees that it has immediate return to it, much more than the poetics of it, which would all by itself would be great, but would have immediate returns of other areas of public policies. So our challenge here maybe in this, of our challenger who are in this field of research, is to search for much more evidence, data, where at least to impact the pragmatics that, well, invest in culture, in arts, not just the governments, but also the companies and all the society, in terms of accepting the culture, not just criticizing. They criticize it because they don't have the knowledge sometimes, because they ignore because they don't have the entire information regarding the importance of our role. So we provide data, providing data information maybe is the best way out for us researchers to show people the importance of culture, because funds, resources will diminish even more, the demands in other areas will increase, and this challenge of searching for a new window of opportunities that come not only from culture, but education, companies, that's maybe this window of opportunity we have to seek is our greatest challenge. But as Claudia said, at the moment, the society yearns for knowledge. Art, science, education are the basis of knowledge. And so maybe this is the best opportunities we're having now to turn this key. We are investments, we're not costs. That's maybe a cliche, but it's a fact. We're not an investment. We're not cost. We are investment. Did I stop? Or did Eduardo stop?
Thank you, lovely.
Susanna is going to be the mediator now. Where is Susanna? Saron, so I'm going to take this opportunity and continue talking. Maybe Claudia could say something. So, wow, Edu, you look much better now. Great. I cannot hear what the moderator is saying. She's on mute. Oh, now I can hear her. Well, so I'm going to take the opportunity and ask João Leiva. We have research exclusive of Idea Big Data of a partner made for this forum, where 50% of the interviews are against government control of cultural production in Brazil. Yet it shows that 50% of the interviews that cultural production should highlight the qualities and beauties of Brazil in case these cultural incentives are actually invested to it. You talked a lot about the Rouanet law, which fosters the public-private partnership regarding the cultural sector. We also received a question from the audience. Carolina de Quiroga asks a layman question. How does the Rouanet law operate? If you could explain it to her. Sure. How the Rouanet law operates. It authorizes companies taxed based on their real profit to use part of the tax. They have to pay 4% to invest in cultural projects. Which ones? It has to be specific ones, the ones that were approved by the Ministry of Culture. So it's curious because the law was enacted and installed during the Collor government, which was the greatest shutdown we had in the cultural sector. The Ministry of Culture had just been created. Then you created the Ministry of Culture at the time, and then you had the first elected president by the population after the dictatorship. He ends everything related to culture and creates this law. And then the Rouanet law is in force up until today. But this law shouldn't be the only mechanism. It is one of the only mechanisms we have. This government made some changes in the Rouanet law. So the Rouanet law is just only one source of investment. We have state and municipal funds, and we have a national fund of culture. The federal government has been discussing it since the time of the military dictatorship of the 70s. At the time, despite all the violence, torture, censorship, you already had a vision that culture needed investments. Several governments tried to do it in different ways. I'm very skeptic today of believing that through the federal government, you'll be able to do that. I hope I'm wrong, but I think it will work better, much better within the municipal level. If you think together the budget of the municipal governments, I think it's close to 50 billion. With great efforts, we were able to get this 3 billion emergency fund for culture. So it's difficult to believe that it's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. And it's not just in theory, but we need to change, to turn the table. We need several initiatives. We need the institutions that need to, and the agents within the Ministry of Culture, they haven't shown that they are strong and resilient as I thought they would show. I thought that the audiovisual sector would be much more resilient to resist to this period, but it's been facing much hardship. Claudia knows this better than I do. We had 3 production films in 1902 with the shutdown of the color era to reach more than 190 film produced in Brazil in a year. And it could be helping us, our GDP, to overcome its crisis, but it's not happening. We're stuck. And I think that it's not a project. It's a day-to-day kind of task in the government. So, but we have to turn the table, think of new things, and take advantage that the Rouanet law, it worked, it resisted, because now it serves 3,000 cultural productions across Brazil. Yes, it has problems. It has a large concentration in Rio, São Paulo. Yes, that's true, but it serves a large number of the cultural production for these great creative hubs like São Paulo and Rio. It's fundamental, but it's not enough to reach the final point, the edge of the production. You need new types of sources. The last adjustment to the Rouanet law has not worked, and it will continue not working. All these adjustments to the Rouanet law, they have not worked, and in my opinion, will continue not working because the centralization is still there. I think the best way through education. Of course, if you should have a Ministry of Culture that is a single one, I don't have a specific opinion about that. Today, I believe it should be the Ministry of Education and Culture, but maybe next week, if you ask me again, I might change my opinion. I don't think that's the most important thing, this type of dilemma. I think the most important thing is to think of new alternatives and funds. Teresa, you are the moderator now because of your lives. No, I'm back, guys. I'm back. In the next block, we're going to make some propositions, but it's very interesting now that we're at it. Claudia, you talked about challenges. Claudia, you work in our large project was the construction of the Creative Economy Secretariat during the Dilma government, created several plans to Brazil targeted toward immaterial heritage, data survey, and so on. But the secretariat was eliminated. Why was the secretariat important to value national culture? Now your question was excellent. Well, it's an important question because our memory is so short regarding public policies in Brazil. And I think one of our tasks as a professor researchers is to register what has been done so that our memory will still be alive. So it upsets me when we see a ministry being eliminated, the content being erased, and that's very severe for the institutions, for the history of Brazil. Our task here today, all of us here today, the students, the speakers, we need to always maintain our cultural institutional memory alive before it is completely forgotten. For example, the IFAN, they want to eliminate IFAN because it's an institution that is very solid, Kepler throughout Brazil, facing real estate speculation. And of course, it's a burden, it's a troublesome for the great public economic powers such as Giselle, and that episode that happened between Marcelo Carreiro and Giselle, it became a police situation. Many times our institutions are always at risk. I wanted to leave this message here and say that when I went to Brasilia, I went with a suitcase and a book in it that I want to tell you, the author of this book on July 26th, if he was alive, he would be 100 years old. Celso Furtado. He was the father of the first cultural incentive law. Celso Furtado was invited by Sarney, basically the first minister of culture in Brazil. I know we won't have time to talk about it, but we have to keep our memory alive. Who was Celso Furtado? He was a man that thought that development in Latin America was essential and was very rooted on our culture also. And I think Teresa Cristina's speech was champion, because what is the culture of the Brazilian development? And culture is a word that can be tricky, because not all culture is good. Some cultures need to end. So we have to just make a difference here between the senses, the several notions of culture. Okay, so we have, what does that mean? It means that culture, it places us in a mainstream place, in a set of values that are enforced in a certain time. Our culture is an old culture from the 19th, the 20s. For example, the commodities. A country that lives based on commodities, feeding Chinese cow. Guys, we're in Brazil. Imagine we are destroying our forests, and we don't understand that this deforestation is making our investments go away, for example. So we are seen as, let's put it this way, scum in the international scenario in terms of sustainable development. Today, Celso Furtado has a classical book which is called Creativity and Dependence of the Industrial Civilization. He says, the activity is the basis of the idea of development. Creativity is the basis of any type of development thinking. So you have to think of creativity inside the economy. So he already estimated that work would be scarce, there would be large precarization, that income concentration would increase, we would diminish the importance of culture. So I went to Brazil to create a secretariat where I created a Ministry of Culture, which was Celso, and he helped me a lot. And he was me until the end. But at the beginning, to answer your question made by Eduardo, I think that the ministry was not ready to have a creative economy secretariat. I think Brazil is still lags behind in this discussion. We can't see culture as development. I have to talk about the 2030 agenda for sustainable agenda, the ONU agenda. I'm participating now as a guest in ONU. I'm the consultant to work on the culture and education with 17 goals within the sustainable development, because culture crosses all these development goals. Culture has to be treated as an alternative to save the planet, because we're still in the 20th century. The pandemic is separating generations, eras, showing that there's a body, a corpse that should be buried, which is our development model, our development model, which is old, which concentrates too much, which is is not, we are talking about the new normal. This is not the new normal. What we had before was a normal. I think now we have to treat now. I think that we have to create something such as a national unified system regarding culture, like a SUS of culture. Now, why can I not fight for a view of a sanitized version of culture? Because culture in the 2030 agenda is on in places, in the cities, in the environmental issue, economic development, urban development, the ecological development we have now is a type of development that is not sustainable anymore. So what happened in Curitiba, which is a climate change issue, is something that we have to think about, which is a consequence of the way of living we have been living up to now. So the secretariat ended because it is born in the PT and dies in the same government. It was Juca Ferreira, the PT minister, that also dismantled the same secretariat. So he says, no, culture, we don't need it. Culture is everywhere. If culture is everywhere, then it's not anywhere. We need to think culture, as Saron also said, that if we don't have figures, if we don't have research, indicators, my task with UNESCO now is to work based on indicators, on figures. Our country, 40 million informal jobs. We need indicators for informal jobs and not just for formal jobs. Exactly. Maybe the law can provide this type of visibility to people. Let me explain. I didn't disappear out of nowhere. We had a problem with connection, and I think the cyclone reached Rio. It's very windy here. Teresa, would you like to add something? Yes, I would like to talk a bit about the Rouanet law, and I would like to provoke you a bit. Saron, João, Cláudia. A few years ago, Maria Bethânia, she was going to create a project which was a daily video project, such as poetry daily videos every day. Just to give an example, okay, guys? She was going to create a daily video of about 4 minutes, for example, per day, reciting a poetry. And this project was published in the newspaper, and this new paper was much more worried about saying that this project would capture millions approved by the Rouanet law, and didn't talk much about the project. It talked much more about the figures than the project itself and the details of the project. The public opinion, which does not know what the Rouanet law is, even the student that was talking about in her question, someone was asked about what is the Rouanet law. The Brazilian, in general, doesn't know how the Rouanet law works, doesn't know what it is. The average Brazilian thinks that it gives money to people. That's not it. All these horrible congressmen started attacking the artists as amateurs of the Rouanet law. They're saying that artists, for example, I never had a project approved by Rouanet law, that we artists, we take money from the government through the Rouanet law. So when this happened with Maria Bethânia, which is an amazing, flawless artist, she gave up of doing the project because she was attacked in the social network. I'd like to know from you guys, can't we admit that we don't know what the Rouanet law, even despite all of its resilience? Shouldn't we admit that, be honest and say it works, but most of us don't understand it and create lots of fake news on it? Wouldn't it be good to create a project to clarify what the Rouanet law is, but in a language that everyone understands well? I'd like you to, any of you, all of one of you answers, please.
Não, mas a gente quer saber também.
Saron, vou passar a bola para você.
Well, Saron, I think that you should answer this question. The Rouanet law, I think that we should look at the Rouanet not from the mercenary side of it, the financial side of it. Actually, the law involves the government approving a project, the producer having that art. There is one side of the Rouanet law that actually is to produce projects that really has a great entertainment value. So this idea of the project didn't go ahead. The financial side of the law became highlighted more than not the needed. And when we talk about the patronage of these events, the patronage of these events is what is talked about with the Rouanet law. And the Rouanet law has been attacked for the last 20 years. But people do not look at the Rouanet law as a whole, holistically. Of course, we have problems in the application of the law. We have the problems with the demography, with the geography. And when we talk about how this impacts different people, we have also to look at the demographic data of who the law impacts. An important bit of the law is the fact that anything that is 60% of every funding that is given to the culture comes from the municipality. So 60%, as I said before, of the funding to culture come from the municipality. Less than 10% is from the federal government. So you have to think about that. So we have to look after that. The government needs to look after this area. The government has to think, if not the next 10 years, at least 5 years. So, and here in Brazil, the federal government have like 53 metrics to be assessed in the culture segment. So if you have so many metrics that need to be assessed in a project, that means that the project has to fulfill too many requirements. That doesn't make sense. If you make a comparison with education, it's only 6 metrics. So these, I think, that complicates the Rouanet law and makes it a bit obscure and prevents transparency of the law. So the Rouanet law, it was completely, the image of the law has been damaged before the population. And what people talk about is, well, we don't have respirators and you want to have money for culture. But then actually you should understand, actually, we need to clarify to the population that actually we have 3 waves in terms of health problems. The first one is the pandemic. The second problem is the fact that we stop treating the chronic diseases that now are not being treated because people do not go to the hospital because they cannot go. And actually, the third wave that I want to highlight here is related to culture, that is to do with the health, mental health. people will have a great impact on their health, mental health. In England, they have amazing studies showing how the culture will help mental health. But this is something that we have to prove to the Brazilian society. We have to show them this is how culture will help you. We have to be more transparent with the resources. And now we have this additional challenge with this new law that has just been approved, which is the emergency fund for the culture. So we have to use this data. We have to have statistic metrics that will support the investment in culture. And of course, this is a problem in this government, but it's not just this government. It comes from other governments before the current governing authorities. So sometimes we have to analyze this context as a whole. We have to look at everything within the different contexts. I'm really sorry, Eduardo. I spent more than 1 minute talking about that. But I think that Teresa was very interesting in bringing this issue up. Eduardo, it was very interesting what you've mentioned. It is important to dialogue with the society, and it is important to dialogue with the politicians that convey information to the society. Here in our forum, we try to bring the politicians to our debate. Sometimes they do not come, like we invited Rodrigo Maia, but he didn't come here. What we are trying to do is bring the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive here to debate, to talk with the population and convey that information. So this is just me trying to open up my heart to you at the moment. So now I would like to talk about what we're going to propose next. This is the topic of the forum this year. What's next, Brazil? And I would like to ask Neiva, when we talk about the future, we have to talk about access to culture. And when we talk about the Vale Cultura, which is a project that started nearly a decade ago, this is a project, the Vale Cultura, that it was implemented in Brazil in 2010. By 2016, some research had shown that actually it increased, it created benefits. So my question to you, Leiva, is, in this current landscape post-pandemic in Brazil, and with the digitalization of the culture, how do you see Brazil promoting a wider access to culture? Thank you for this question, Eduardo, says Mr. João Leiva. What we are doing as cultural acts, we map people going to cinema, to the theater, any cultural activity. The access is always better for those that actually had access to music class, to theater, write a poem, write creatively. So this is needed at our schools. People that have access to this sort of modules in schools, they are more sensitive to culture and they use culture more, they consume culture. So this is a very serious problem. It is very hard to attract funds. It's hard to attract funds for culture if we have all these difficulties in the education. The second point, we have to stop talking to ourselves. We have to start talking to other areas, other segments. When Claudia talks about creative economy, and when she talks about the creative economy being present in other areas, we have to remember that we have to talk with other people. Actually, I want to see the culture secretariat talk about culture, but I want to hear as well the tourism secretariat talking about culture, because tourism has been vetted, has been separated from culture. And if we look in the post-pandemic scenario, the tourism will have a great challenge to recover, and culture can help that. For example, in Brazil now we have the carnival, we have the folk parties that happen during June, the month of June. So the theaters, when we talk about London, for example, London is a big cultural pot. Here in London, we can see that the theaters are suffering. So I believe that for culture to flourish, we have to talk with the other segments of the society. We have to look at all our historical background and valuing that. Even during the dictatorship, we had a program of investment of visiting the historical cities in Brazil. And I believe that that has to be, we have to retake that effort with tourism. And we have to stop with discontinuity. We need to stop the lack of stability that we have in this sector. We had 16 years, Fernando Henrique, Lula. Then we had Lula 6 years, 3 culture minister. And now in 1 year and a half with the new government, we had 2 new ministers. So it seems that Brazil has a problem. We are not experiencing public policy in Brazil, and this is a sin. And we are not implementing projects that could be better. So when you talk about culture, culture is definitely important. When I was at primary school, my teacher, the only thing that she used to tell me is like, oh, paint, just color this drawing. And I used to hate that. I couldn't, and now when I work in a museum, as I do, I can see the connection between coloring a drawing at school and what is presented in art. So I would like to ask you, Teresa Cristina, do you think that there is, with the digitalization of culture, do you think that there is a more enhancement of the value of culture? And do you think that culture will be important and the art will be important in this new post-pandemic moment? I believe that art is important and it exists to face the reality. And when we look at the Brazilian context, because we cannot travel outside, we have to travel inside. And this journey that we do inside via books, via exchange of ideas with others, what I've noticed during this pandemic in my segment that is music became an ally. Here in Brazil, everything is very recent. Even democracy is quite recent in Brazil. So we have to take that into account. So what I've been noticing when I sing, when I look, when we see the different artists, and with the great names that I encounter, and I never noticed them before, is that this contact, this virtual contact that we are having is a window opening. And that person can be in contact, touch the hearts of 5,000, 10,000 people. And I believe that now there is a movement of these people, not only because it fulfilled the need of those people that needed that window opened, but then actually is opening an opportunity for these people themselves to enjoy art. I don't I don't remember. I am not very clear of how how frequently I'm doing lives, but some of the artists that I met via my lives, they are creating their own live channels. They have their own fans, like Borba in Pernambuco. Other artists that are quite well known, like Margareth Menezes, asked me about some of the composers that she saw in my life. I believe that this is, of course, is very, very specific to what I'm doing. But when I see the work of others via my lives, and when I notice this public at home wanting some entertainment, I believe that actually we have to think that culture is the one that is putting these people to bed. It's making these people to feel well. And it is very important to have this here because culture has been demonized in Brazil in the recent times. We had a lot of fake news. We had a lot of statements saying that certain or certain books should not be shown to children because of its content. So I believe that at this moment in Brazil, this censorship has gone away. And I believe that culture now is what is giving us affection and put us to bed to dream, even if the next day we wake up to the eternal nightmare that is this pandemic. Culture is what is driving us, to keeping us up, to keep us motivated to live the next day. I do several actions during the day. I wake up sad. I get depressed with the news that I hear. Then I feed myself. Then I start cleaning the house. And then when I start doing some research for my lives in the evening, my mood starts changing. And sometimes I do not start the lives in a good mood, but I start laughing once I start talking to people. So, and then I go to bed happy, and so on and so forth.
Aproveitar esse gancho que você falou, o Saron disse lá no
Um,
começo que
Saron
tem
mentioned at the
que a gente precisa
beginning
ficar
that
atento,
there is
que é
two areas
protocolos
that we
e
have to pay
purpose para
attention.
essa
Is
reabertura.
the protocols and the
Falou que é
purpose
tudo
to
que a gente pensa.
reopen
Então são
culture.
três P.
And
E eu
Claudia
queria
talked
pedir para
about
você que é o intérprete da
culture
música para
as
encerrar essa nossa
power.
live.
So
Com
I would like to ask you, as a
música, obviamente.
music power,
Se
to
você
finish
estiver
this
comigo,
live
aproveitar
here
esse
with a
momento,
music.
dar a volta por
Perhaps you
cima,
could
que
sing
você
us
vai
a
terminar
song that
a live
represents this
hoje.
moment that we have in Brazil.
Eu lembro que você tinha me pedido
I
uma
remember that you asked me that.
e eu sugeri a você
I think that you asked me a song from Hasolini, and I actually have suggested a song from Chico Buarque. So you choose Teresa Cristina, says Eduardo Carvalho. I think that I'm going to sing Chico Buarque, says Teresa Cristina. This is because Chico Buarque is one of
de fundo do poço que a gente entrou.
the great masters of culture in Brazil, and he was deeply attacked. And when he was assaulted verbally by some drunk people. So when the population start attacking a person like Chico Buarque, it means that we are in a very, very bad situation. I believe that Chico Buarque is a Brazilian hero. And his song is like an art, a poetry in art. And I think that this song has everything to do with what we are living now. And it has all to do with hope.
Você é quem manda, falou, tá falado, não tem discussão, não. A minha gente hoje anda falando de lado e olhando pro chão, viu? Você que
This song,
inventou esse
the
estado,
interpreter informs, is
inventou
called
de inventar
Apesar de Você,
toda a
Despite You,
escuridão.
and is a song by Chico
Você
Buarque.
que inventou o pecado, esqueceu-se de inventar o perdão. Apesar de você, amanhã há de ser outro dia. Eu pergunto a você, vai se esconder da enorme euforia? Como vai proibir quando o galo insistir em cantar? Água nova brotando e a gente se amando, meu Deus, sem parar, tá tão longe isso. Quando chegar o momento, esse meu sofrimento, vou cobrar com juros, juro. Todo esse amor reprimido, esse grito contido, esse samba no escuro. Você que inventou a tristeza, ora tem a fineza de desinventar. Você vai pagar e é dobrado cada lágrima rolada nesse meu penar. Apesar de você, amanhã há de ser outro dia. Ainda
So the song
pago pra
goes,
ver o
despite you,
jardim florescer,
tomorrow is going to be
qual
another day.
você não
The garden
Você
will
vai
grow.
se amargar, vendo o dia raiar, sem lhe pedir
You are going to feel
licença.
bad
Eu
when the
vou
day
morrer de rir,
starts.
que esse dia há de vir antes do que você pensa. Apesar de você,
Despite you,
apesar de
tomorrow will be
você,
another day.
amanhã há de ser outro dia. Você vai ter que ver amanhã
You will have to
renascer,
see the
esbanjar
morning
poesia.
restart
Como
and
vai
the
explicar,
squandering of
vendo o
poetry.
céu clarear?
How will you
De
explain
repente,
watching the sky
impunemente,
get clear
como
and
vai
suddenly,
abafar nosso coro
with
a
impunity,
cantar
how will it
na sua
drown
frente?
our singing
Apesar de
choir?
você, apesar de você,
Despite you,
amanhã
despite
há de
you, despite
ser
you, it
outro
will be,
dia.
we are going to have another day.
Você vai se dar mal, etc e tal, lá, 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 lá. Lalaiá. Eu adoro um samba que termina com lalaiá, porque aí cada um inventa o seu lalaiá.
Eu vou fazer que nem você ensinou ontem, tem que aplaudir em cima, aplaudir pra cima, né?
So I'm going to do like you said. I have to clap, put the hands up to clap.
Muito obrigado a vocês, mas eu gostaria de
Teresa, I would like to thank you and thank all the panelists here, and I would like to invite all the viewers to take part in one of our projects. At the end of each panel, we are talking about one of the projects that we are supporting. We are doing a fundraising project, and today we are highlighting the fundraising campaign called Maré diz não to coronavírus. So Maré says no to coronavirus. Maré is a area of Rio that encompasses 16 slums in Rio de Janeiro, and they are fundraising to help with food security, help to the population that live in the streets, generation of income to women, prevention and care and healthcare, production and dissemination of information and content that are safe, and of course support to groups, to local groups that work with culture and art in the area. So if you can help, please check further info in our social media. I would like to thank all of you for being here. Teresa, thank you very much for being here. Save your voice for the live that we're going to do in a short while. Claudia, thank you very much for the information. Eduardo Saron, thank you for all the amazing work that you do at Itaú Cultural. João Leiva, thank you for mapping and for generating data that Brazil just needs so much. We'd like to thank all of you here, our organizing committee, Marcela Freire, Luísa Santa Bárbara, Camila Tazzini, Luiz Fernando Heigman, Fabrizia De Marco, who took part in creating this culture panel. Studio 42 for the production, across for the interpreting in English language, and mais differences for the interpreting in sign language. TV Estadão for the broadcast, and you for being following this with us. This session will be available in our website, and we are going to be back here on Friday at 17 hours Brazil time and 21 hours UK time. And we are going to talk with women and pandemic. And we are going to have Deborah Diniz, Politica Malugato, and Maria